This AI system transforms anyone
to any character placed in any scene in just one click.
To the B, it's M 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 to the B.
And all of those are created by this one AI system. So let's get started. Hey, if you're new here, my name is Jay. I spent a decade in creative and marketing work and half a decade leading data teams, and now founded our AI solutions group and RoboNuggets, our education arm, where we have several hundred members, all AI practitioners across the globe. And here, our mission is to make creating with AI easy to learn regardless what your background is, with a wealth of lessons that most people join for, but most members stay because of the community that we have built. All right, so before we get into how the automation works, I want to first explain why a system like this is useful in the first place. And there's essentially three main use cases. And the first one is you can use this to create your own digital influencer. And a clear example of this is Michaela, who has more than 2 million followers and has actually done a lot of brand deals with major companies in the past. But the thing is, she actually became popular even before AI was a thing. But the difference now is even a single person can build characters like these because the tools are finally easy enough to use. And she's not the only one, by the way. Many AI influencers today have strong followings and get brand sponsorships simply because of their reach. And if you really think about it, this sort of makes sense because people have always followed fictional characters even before. So if you build your own character with this technology, you can grow an influencer without ever showing your face. The second is to use this for long-form educational content. So in this space, there are people like Zini, who never shows her face, but she teaches AI to more than 140,000 subscribers and is definitely already earning through the YouTube creator program. There are also creators like Sanadu, who started with motion capture, but similar to earlier, the difference now is that AI lets anyone do this without expensive setups. And it makes creating characters like these more accessible. And finally, you can use this for brand work as well. And to give a real-life example, one of our core members, Dragon, who is based in Europe, is actually working with a restaurant chain that wants content but prefers not to show their face. And apart from that, they are also trying to build up this character to be the face of their restaurant chain. And so by using a system like this, he transforms recordings of the owner into a character that they now use across their content channels. And all these three use cases are real services that a one-person AI creative agency can offer, which is exactly what we teach at RoboNuggets, which if you want to learn more about that business model, then you can check out this previous lesson. And all these services can be powered by this one AI system, which we built in n8n. And in case you're new, n8n is a no-code automation tool similar to Zapier or Make. But the great thing with n8n is that if you have this template, which you can just download here if you're part of the community, you can import that into n8n, and that will load the automation for you from scratch. But if you're a beginner, don't worry, because I'll be going through how to set up this automation node by node as well. And there's essentially two ways to set up this system. So if you just want to transform the video, then this is much simpler. So we'll go through that first. But if you want to transform the video as well as the sound of the person's voice, that can also be done. So I'll show how to do that as well. And it's also not as complex as you think, because if you see here, a lot of the nodes are pretty much repeated. So later you'll find that a lot of the setup will just be duplicating what we already did for part one. Which, to go through that, essentially with these creative workflows, the approach I usually teach is that you have a section for your inputs where you arrange all of the inputs that you feed into this model, which does all of the creation. And then you just have a node or section for the output where you store the final video. So when you create a new workflow, you just want to add a trigger here, which indicates how this workflow is triggered. For now, we'll just trigger it manually by clicking on this execute workflow. And then for us to set up our input, you just want to search for the Google Sheet node, specifically this get rows in sheet. And if you haven't connected it to your Google Sheets yet, just do that here by creating a new credential and signing in with Google. But once you do that, you can now search for your documents or sheets in here, which for our case would be this one. And if you're part of the community, you can just copy it through this link. And if you open that, you'll see that we have a pretty simple template where these columns in black are just identifiers so that you have a proper tracking of what you're creating. You have the driving video, which if you open that, that is basically your video reference that you want to capture the motion of. And you have the image reference of the character that you want in the final video. You have a column where we'll be placing the output, as well as a status where our automation will just pick up the rows where we've set this as create and then mark them as done after it's finished. So you may be asking how you can get these URLs. The easiest way is if your image or video is already uploaded online. Usually what you can do is do a right click and then copy the image or video address and then paste it here. Or if you're uploading from your computer, you can use this service called Cloudinary. And we use them a lot for their file storage capability because it's free. And in Cloudinary, if you go to their assets section, you can upload files here. And if you do a right click, you can copy this URL, which you can now paste here. And just to show how the automation works, we'll try 3 videos in total for this tutorial. So in this node, the last thing that you need to set up is to just select sheet 1, which is the tab we have here, and then set the filter where the column called status is set to create, which is essentially this one. So now if we execute this step, when that's done, it now grabs for you those 3 rows loaded into n8n. And so the next thing to do is to transform those videos. So we do that through this HTTP request node, which you can select. And this node is one of the most used nodes in n8n because it's the primary way by which we can call on third-party tools from within this platform. So to use it, just go ahead and rename it so that you know what it does. Change the method to post because we'll be posting a request. And that request we need to send somewhere. So we'll be putting it into this URL, which in this case will be this one, where you can see it is being offered by Fall AI. And in case you're new, Fall.ai is basically an AI model aggregator. So if you go to their page here, you can see they have a lot of models that you can connect to. And so the service that they do is that they let you connect to these models much easier and usually at lower costs versus if you access them via subscription tools like Higgsfield or FreePick. So here, if we search for the One Animate model, you'll find this One Animate Replace and Move model, which we'll be using for this tutorial. And I'll show the difference of these in part 2. But for now, if you click on this Move model, you'll see that here in the playground, you can actually use this model directly. But to use it in an automation like n8n, you just need to understand and read through this API section, which we've already done. And so this is the URL we need to post our request to. But that request needs to be structured correctly so that Fall AI can accept it. So if you just toggle the send body as on, change the JSON to specify body using JSON, here in this section is where we'll be placing our request. So if you change this to expression and click this so that you can see what you're typing. And if we just zoom out a bit, if we paste our expression here, and you can see there's a lot of attributes here, which you can just go to Fall AI's page to understand if you want to tweak those. But the most important part here is this video URL where we have this green text. So that means that's basically a dynamic value. So what it's doing is it's just referring to the driving video in the previous node, which is this one, so that in the actual run, this is what it passes, which if you remember is our driving video that we uploaded in Cloudinary. And we also have our image URL, which points to our image reference. Now, if we shuffle through this arrow, you'll actually see that we are passing on 3 items in total, and these correspond directly to the items that we loaded in the Google Sheet. So now, if you execute this step, this will error, and what it will tell you is that we haven't set up our authorization yet. And this is important so that not just anyone can use these models, because Fall.ai does use their own servers or computers to run these models for us. So what you need to do is under authentication, click on generic credential type, click on header auth, and under header auth, just go ahead and create a new credential, name it as Fall AI credential so that you can remember. Under name, you need to type out exactly authorization, and this is as per Fall AI's documentation. And for the value, you need to change this to expression so that you can see what you're typing. Type in key, space, and then you'll be pasting your API key in here, which you can get in this URL. It will look something like this, and once you make sure that the capitalizations are correct and there's no extra space after your API key, you can just hit save, make sure that's selected, and when you execute this step, what it will now tell you is it submitted those 3 items to Fall AI to activate their 1.2 model, which is now generating your videos. And so since that takes some time, we do need to set a wait node here, which you can just find here. And later we'll set this to a longer time, but for now you can just click execute step so that this 5 seconds counts down and you can proceed to the next step. And once that's finished, all it does is just transfer those items to the next node, which should be another HTTP request, but this time this will be to get the video. So you can leave the method as get, and under URL, you just want to find the transform anyone node and get the request or response URL rather from there and place it here. Make sure your authentication is set to the Fall AI credential. And if I execute this step, most likely you'll see that the request is still in progress. So we just need to wait a bit. But if you want to check how those generations are doing, you can just head to Fall AI's page for this model, head to requests, and you'll be able to check here how those generations are progressing. So for this one, it's still in progress. And now that some time has passed, you can see our generations here. So that's looking pretty good. This is the one with Padme and this one with Daenerys. And honestly, as of right now, this model is probably the best in motion capture because not only does it capture the motion really well, but the expressions on the faces are also perfectly replicated. It can take a while to run though, especially if you're generating for higher resolutions, which we did for this case. So this one in particular ran for around 10 or so minutes, which is part of the reason why learning how to automate it in this manner is useful for you as well. So what we can now do is just execute this step. And if we look at that, basically what we have are 3 items where we have these MP4 files, which if you paste in your browser, you can now preview that video. And that's pretty much what we need. So the last step here is to just log those MP4 links into our Google Sheets. So to do this, just search for the Google Sheets node once again, specifically the update row in sheet function. You'll need to find your template that you were using, the sheet that you were using as well. And if we go back to that template, what this node will basically do is to just add our output in here and also mark this status into done. So the way to do that is first change this column to match on into the row number. And this one is just needed so that it can find which rows it needs to update. And so to do that, just go ahead and search for the get rows in sheet, your very first Google Sheet in here. Drag this row number value here. It gives you a preview of one of the items it'll update here. So it says 2, which is corresponding to this row. And then the only things we need to update is the output, which is going to come from your get video node, this URL field, which you can just drag. And then the status, you can just mark them as done. So if we look at our Google Sheet and execute this step, you'll see this update in real time. And there you go. You now have those videos logged, which if you prefer to auto-upload them to a file storage option like Google Drive or Box, that's also possible with n8n. And there you go. You now have your own AI motion capture system transforming a video to any character that you want. But now there are some use cases where you want to transform not just the video, but also the sound of the person's voice. So when you're creating educational content, for example, maybe you want to change the voice into something else. And so what we can do is to just expand this workflow into this one. And to make this easy, if you open a new workflow, what you can actually do is just copy these nodes and paste it here, because a lot of these will pretty much be repeated anyway. So doing it like that will save you a lot of time. And if you look at the final workflow that we have here, the structure of it is rather simple, because if you remember this transform video step, this is what we just set up. But if you want to also transform the audio, what we just need to do as a pre-step is to separate the audio from the video. So I'll show how to do that. And then once we've transformed the video as well as the audio, we just combine them together automatically to finish with the final output. And so to do that, your input section will remain largely the same. But this time, if I open this Google Sheet node, I just want to change this Sheet 1 into Sheet 2. And if I go to Sheet 2 in our template, you'll see it's pretty much the same type of columns that we have here, but the only addition we did is this audio reference, which if you open this link, that will take you to this audio file, which is going to be our voice reference. So if you play this.
Hello, Chatterbox user. Let's generate some awesome and fun content together.
So that is now the audio we're going to use. And if in case you need a voice, you can check out some of the free ones in 11 Labs. But of course, you can also use your or your friend's voice. And what's great about this system is even if you have only like 10 seconds of voice in there, that's usually enough for the system to copy it. Apart from that, these columns are the same, but you can see here that I added this type, which you can set as either replace or move. So what we'll be doing in this case is we'll be trying out both of those models so that I can show you the difference of one animate replace versus one animate move. And for this one, this is going to be our driving video.
So you can have a character like me talk about whatever you want, for as long as you want, and even drop me into new scenes while my voice stays perfectly the same.
And we'll be using the same image reference. So now back to the workflow, if we execute this step, what it's simply going to do is to grab these 2 rows and load them into our automation whenever it runs. So now step 1 is to separate the audio from the video. So the way we do that is still via an HTTP request node. But this time, instead of sending it to this URL, we'll be using this service instead, which if you look at that, this is hosted by replicate.com, which if you go there, it's pretty much the same as File AI, but they just have some more variety in their models because some are community contributed. So if we search for extract audio, we're using this model, which to use this in an automation, you again need to read through this API, which we've already done. And so to use it, you just need to change your JSON body into this expression. So if we expand this and zoom out, there's other attributes here which you can tweak, but the most important one is to feed it your video here, which we're doing similar to earlier. And what this will do is to just separate out the MP3 file from this MP4 video file. So if we execute this step, this will likely error because once again, we need to set up our credential. So to do that, same as before, we just create a new credential here. For replicate, what you need is again to type in authorization, but for the value, you can change this to expression so that you can see what you're typing. It will be bearer and then space and then your API key. And that API key you can just get here. It will look something like this and you can click on save. And when you make sure that's selected, when we execute this step, it should now give you an output that basically means that this model is already running in the background. So once again, we just set a wait node. So we can just wait for 5 seconds again. And later on, we can just adjust this. But when that's finished, that just lets us set up this last get video node. And here in the URL, the right URL to get it from is going to be somewhere here. So it's this one, this get URL field, which we can just drag there. Make sure that your credential is set to replicate. And when we we execute that step and go to schema, you'll find here the output, which is the MP3 audio file of that video that we are going to transform. So you can just rename this so that you know what it does, because the next thing we're going to do is to set up the video and audio transformation steps. So to do that, I advise you to just unlink this for now and put that in the end. For transform video, since you already set that up, you can just copy this and paste that here and link it accordingly. And when you open this, you just need to make sure that it is properly mapped. So if I expand this, you'll see this is red because it's not mapped correctly anymore because it came from a previous workflow. So now we just need to find it from our get rows in sheet, again, this driving video. So if I drag it there, you'll get the expression, which you can just copy or cut and place here. And same with the image URL, we are getting that from our Google Sheet. So just cut that and place that here. So when you're satisfied with these parameters, this is now ready actually. But a handy tip that I can provide you is if you go back to this URL, change this to expression, and then expand this so that you can see that what we set up now is the move version of this model. So if you delete that, and again, go back to your inputs in the Google Sheet, you remember that we've put in this type in the beginning, which if we drag that to the end, what that will now do is take your input from the Google Sheet so that it runs the model that you want for that particular row. So if you remember, we're running two items. One is the replace. And if I go to the next item here, the next one that will run is the move model still. So that just makes it more flexible. And now if I execute this step, you'll now have two items which are in queue, which you can see in the table view here. And so now we'll just need to wait again up until this generation is finished. So since we're setting this up, we can just set this to something like 5 seconds so that we can continue building this out. And once that's done, this get video step should be the same. So if I execute that step, it will likely say that it's still in progress. So same as before, you can just check to your requests section in the file AI page of this model, and you'll be able to see how it is doing. All right, so once sufficient time has passed, that generation has now finished, which you can preview in file. But over at n8n, if we re-execute this step, that should grab the video for us, same as before. And just a tip so that you don't have to run the transform video again, if in case you need to come back to this later, is to just highlight those nodes and click on P so that you can make sure that the data there is pinned. So to set up the transform audio steps, you can just click Control D when you have these selected so that you can duplicate them and then map this accordingly. And then this one, you can set it up by changing this to transform audio to rename it so you know what it's for. And here we'll be posting a request, but this time to this URL, which you can see is still offered by File AI, but this time using the Chatterbox model, which if you search that on File AI, you'll find this model. And basically what it does, if you check the playground where you can use it directly, is you just provide it a source URL to transform. You provide it a target voice that it needs to match, and it will provide you that transform voice automatically. And similar to before, you just need to go through this API documentation to know how it works. But basically, this is the URL that we are sending our request to. And the body itself, you can just remove this and instead paste something like this expression, which if I open, you'll see it's very simple. We are just passing our source audio URL, which comes from the previous node, which if you remember is the one we extracted from the video. So it's this one, we just map it here. And then the target voice, if you recall, this should come from the very first node that we have here in the Google Sheets. So right now it's red because the name of the node doesn't match this. So to correct that, what we can just do is drag this audio reference here and replace that red text so that it maps correctly to this audio file that is our target. So that's it. So if you execute this step now, making sure that you have your File AI credential selected, those two requests are now in queue. And so we just need to wait a bit for this to finish. And so if we execute this step, that should now allow us to test out this get node, which we can just rename to get audio because that is what it's for. Everything here should be set up. So if I execute this step, it actually doesn't take a while. So you can see here that it already has these MP3 files available for us in the output, which if you paste that in your browser, you can preview it here.
For as long as you want. And even drop me into new scenes while my...
So Chatterbox is really good at this, and it was able to transform the voice quite seamlessly, including all the inflection notes in there. And just like earlier, you can pin these nodes once they finish running, and now you can pin these also. So now that we have our audio and video, the next step now is to combine them into one. So to do that, you just need to add a merge node, which to set that up, you can just have the number of inputs as 2, change this to combine and combine by position, and you'll see why in a bit. But if I just map these input branches here, I can now select this merge node and execute this step. And what that basically did is return to us these two items for the two generations we're doing. But this time, the video as well as the audio are contained in one line item, which is what we need in order to proceed to the final step. Which to do that, you can just duplicate any of these and map that here. We just move this out of the way, and then we can now unpin these nodes because we're about to set up this final HTTP request, but this time it would be to merge the video and audio. And the service we'll use is still File AI, but in this case, we'll be sending it to this URL, which you can see is still Fall AI, but we're using this service called FFmpeg, which if you're completely new, FFmpeg is one of the most trusted auto editing frameworks and has been around since more than 20 years already. But previously, to use it, you do need some technical expertise. But now with services like Fall, you're able to use them much easier through these API endpoints is what we call them. But to use it, you just need to set your credential to Fall. And then for the body here, you replace that with an expression like this, which if you open it, you'll see that what we have here is just our video URL being passed as well as our audio URL being passed, the ones we just generated. And what this model will do is to just stitch those two together. So now if we execute this step, we now have those two requests in queue. And so we just wait a bit for that to finish. It doesn't actually take that long with FFmpeg. It's quite fast. That's why it's so popular. And once that's done, we can set up this node, just change the name of it so that we know what it does, but the setup of it is actually all the same. So if we execute this step, now we have these MP4 files, which is the final combined video. So before we preview that, let's just finish this off with the output node here, which the only change you need for this specific workflow is to change this from sheet 1 into sheet 2. Because like before, what this node will do is update our sheet 2 to mark these jobs as done and also put the output here. And so to do that, same as before, we can just match it based on the row number, get it from the very first Google Sheet node, map that there so that this node knows which rows to update. The status, we will just mark that as done. And the output we will get coming from the previous node of getting the final video, which is here. So now if I run this step, what it will do is to just update these rows and provide you with the final MP4 files, which we can now preview. So this is the one for One Animate Replace.
You can have a character like me talk about whatever you want, for as long as you want, and even drop me into new scenes while my voice stays perfectly the same.
So you can see the character has been replaced as well as the voice. And this one is the version where we use the move model of One Animate.
But whatever you want, for as long as you want, and even drop me into new...
So voice is the same, the character is the same, but you can see the difference between replace and move is that the background also changes when you use the move model. While for the replace, what the model basically does is to just put your character into the same scene. So that's pretty useful depending on what you are after. But there you go. That is now the automation in full. Final reminder is to just set these wait nodes on an appropriate time. So for example, for this transform video, if you're rendering in higher resolution like 720p, usually you can allocate something like 10 minutes or even more depending on your use case. And in case you're curious, I summarize the costs here as well, where One Animate is 4 cents per second for 480p. It's 8 cents per second for 720p. So if you have brand budgets, that's actually really, really cheap, especially if you compare it to having to use motion capture rigs. That's magnitudes more expensive than what these models can offer. Chatterbox is also very cheap. That's why we recommend it. So if you generate, for example, 10 minutes or transform the audio for 10 minutes, that's only 15 cents. So very economical. And then these two other models, which under the hood just uses FFmpeg, they cost almost free because FFmpeg is actually an open source framework. So at this point, you're basically just paying these services for the cost of electricity to run their computers or servers, since you're offloading that video editing job to them. So there, I hope you learned something new. And if you want to grab this template for a shortcut, you can just find it in the RoboNuggets community in the link below if you're not yet a member. And here we have tons more lessons around AI and automation and how to create with the best models at the best ways possible. And where we have a really strong community as well. A lot of us share paid opportunities and partnership collaborations here if that's something that you're after. And also recently, we've started issuing out official training certifications from the Robo Group to members who finished our course. So that's quite exciting, especially for those who need it for CV purposes, let's say. But yeah, if you haven't yet, I do encourage you to check out this community just in the link below to see if it's for you. And if you found any value in this video, consider subscribing if you haven't yet, because that helps us a lot to put out more educational content like this. That's it for this one. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.